The first thing he saw was the shadow. It moved against the moonlit side of his barn, small, thin, quick. Caleb Mercer did not scare easily. 20 years alone on the frontier had carved fear out of him and replaced it with habit. He reached for his rifle without thinking, boots silent against the hard Texas earth. Cattle rustlers had been circling these parts for weeks. Hungry men did desperate things. But the shadow wasn't shaped like a man. It was smaller. He stepped around the corner, rifle raised. "Drop it," he barked. The figure froze. A woman turned slowly toward him, clutching a sack so thin and worn it barely held its shape. Cornmeal spilled from a tear at the bottom, pale against the dirt like wasted hope. She wasn't old, maybe 26 or 27, but hardship had drawn fine lines across her face. Her dark hair was braided loosely over one shoulder. Her clothes were patched, threadbare, dusted with road and wind. Behind her, 2 children stood barefoot in the shadows, one boy of about 7, one little girl no older than 5. Their eyes were too big for their faces. The woman lifted her chin, though her hands trembled. "Please," she said. "My children are hungry." Caleb kept the rifle steady. "You're stealing from me." "Yes." Her voice cracked, but she did not look away. "I am." The honesty startled him more than the theft. He glanced at the children. The boy held his sister's hand like he was the one protecting her. Their cheeks were hollow. The little girl swayed slightly, as if standing required more strength than she had left. "Where's your husband?" Caleb asked. The woman swallowed. "Gone." That single word carried more weight than a long explanation ever could. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of dust and cattle and something else, fear. Not fear of him. Fear of what would happen if he said no. Caleb had once known that fear. He lowered the rifle. "Come inside," he muttered. The woman blinked. "What? If you're going to take food," he said gruffly, "you might as well eat it warm." Inside the ranch house, the oil lamp cast a soft golden glow across wooden walls worn smooth by years of loneliness. Caleb hadn't had guests in, he couldn't remember how long. The children stared at the table like it was a miracle when he set bread, beans, and salted meat before them. "Slow," the woman whispered urgently as the boy reached forward. Slowly. Caleb noticed she didn't touch the food at first. She watched her children eat, her own hunger hidden behind quiet vigilance. "You too," he said, nudging a plate toward her. For a moment, pride flickered in her eyes. Then it gave way. "My name is a pony," she said softly. "Caleb." She nodded. "Thank you, Caleb." He shrugged like it didn't matter. But it did. After the children had eaten their fill, sleep claimed them where they sat. Caleb carried the boy to the spare room, a room that had once been meant for something else. For someone else. A pony followed silently, lifting her daughter into her arms. When the children were settled, she turned to him in the hallway. "I will work," she said quickly. "Tomorrow. I can clean, mend, tend animals. I did not come to beg. I came because I had no choice." He believed her. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Her gaze drifted toward the window, toward the endless dark plains. "Fever," she said. "Last winter. It took many. It took him too." Caleb nodded once. He had buried enough neighbors to know what winter could steal. "You've been alone since." "Yes. Why not go to town?" She gave a bitter half-smile. "Town does not always welcome strangers." He understood that too. "Stay the night," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." Morning came with pink light and the smell of coffee. Caleb found a pony already outside, hauling water as if she belonged there. The boy, Tawa, she later told him, was helping scatter feed for the chickens. The little girl, Nita, sat near the porch steps, watching the sunrise like it was something new. "You don't waste time," Caleb observed. She set the bucket down. "Time wastes us if we let it." Over the next few days, something shifted on the ranch. The house no longer echoed. A pony moved with quiet efficiency. She mended torn shirts he'd meant to fix for years. She scrubbed floors that hadn't seen proper care in a decade. She sang softly while she worked, low melodies that seemed older than the land itself. The children brought life into forgotten corners. Tawa followed Caleb like a shadow, asking questions about cattle and fences and the stars. Nita left small wildflowers on the kitchen table each morning, solemn as a priestess performing ritual. Caleb found himself watching them when they weren't looking. He had once dreamed of children. Long ago, before loss hollowed him out. One evening, as they sat on the porch, a pony spoke without looking at him. You have no family. No, none at all. He shook his head. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just honest. Why did you help us? She asked finally. He thought about that. I don't know, he admitted. Then after a pause, maybe I was tired of eating alone. A faint smile touched her lips. But the frontier was not kind to fragile peace. Word traveled fast in small territories. 3 days later, Sheriff Dawson rode up in a cloud of dust. Caleb saw him from the field and felt his jaw tighten. Dawson dismounted slowly, eyes scanning the ranch house. He noticed the extra laundry on the line. The smaller footprints in the dirt. You harboring company? The sheriff asked. Guests, Caleb replied evenly. Dawson's gaze sharpened. I heard about some food going missing from wagons outside town. Caleb said nothing. Widow and 2 kids matching a certain description been seen asking for work, Dawson continued. Some folks aren't too pleased. A pony stepped onto the porch, children behind her. Caleb felt something unexpected rise in his chest, protectiveness, fierce and sudden. They're staying here, he said. For how long? Dawson pressed. As long as I say. The sheriff studied him carefully. You sure you want trouble, Caleb? Town's already uneasy. Caleb met his gaze without flinching. If feeding children is trouble, then I reckon I'll manage. Dawson hesitated. Then he sighed. Just keep the peace, he muttered before mounting his horse. That's all I care about. As the dust settled, a pony's voice came soft behind him. You did not have to do that. Yes, he said quietly. I did. Trouble didn't come in the form of the law. It came in the form of drought. The rains didn't fall that month. Grass yellowed. The creek thinned to a sluggish ribbon. Cattle grew restless. Caleb calculated feed in his head each night, numbers tightening like a noose. One evening he found a pony studying the horizon. The land is thirsty, she said. It'll rain, he replied automatically. But she shook her head. Not yet. How do you know? She crouched, touching the soil. My people watched the sky for generations, she said. The wind is wrong. He didn't argue. Instead, he listened. Together they began preparing, storing water, rationing feed, moving weaker cattle closer to shade. Tawa helped without complaint. Nita gathered fallen branches for kindling, solemn in her duty. Weeks passed. The drought deepened. Ranchers nearby began selling off livestock cheap. Some packed up entirely. One night Caleb sat at the table long after everyone slept. We may not make it, he admitted quietly when a pony joined him. She did not look surprised. Then we face it together, she said. He looked up. Together. The word felt foreign and right. When the storm finally came, it arrived not as gentle rain but as violent fury. Lightning split the sky. Wind tore at the barn doors. One of the outer fences gave way under the pressure of panicked cattle. Caleb! Tawa shouted. Without hesitation, Caleb ran into the chaos. Rain lashed his face, mud sucking at his boots. Cows bellowed in terror. He barely saw the fallen beam before it struck him. Pain exploded through his shoulder as he hit the ground. Through blurred vision he saw figures moving, small but determined. A pony. Tawa. They were herding the cattle back, driving them away from broken fence lines with fierce courage. Nita. A pony called between gusts. The little girl stood safely on the porch, clutching a lantern twice the size of her hands. Caleb tried to stand but couldn't. Then a pony was beside him. Lean on me, she commanded. He wanted to protest. He didn't. Together they staggered toward shelter as thunder rolled overhead. The storm passed by morning. The ranch still stood. So did they. Caleb's shoulder was badly bruised but not broken. A pony bound it carefully, her touch steady. You saved the herd, he told her quietly. We saved it, she corrected. Days later, green began pushing through the soil. Rain had come at last. And with it, something else. Hope. One evening, as the children chased fireflies in the yard, Caleb stood beside a pony beneath a sky painted in gold. You don't have to leave, he said suddenly. She looked at him, searching. I wasn't planning to. He exhaled, something tight in his chest loosening. This place, he continued, it's been empty a long time. I thought that was how it would stay. She stepped closer, not touching, just near enough. Empty places can grow again, she said. He nodded. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, he admitted. Neither do I, she replied. But we face it together. A faint smile curved her lips. Together. Across the yard, Tawa's laughter rang clear and bright. Nita ran into Caleb's legs without warning, wrapping her small arms around him. He hesitated only a second before lifting her into his good arm. She smelled like sunshine and grass. And something else. Belonging. The frontier would always carry hardship. Storms would come again. So would whispers from town, and lean seasons, and trials neither of them could yet imagine. But inside the ranch house that night, the table was full. Not just with food, with voices, with warmth, with life. Caleb Mercer had once believed he was destined to grow old with nothing but cattle and silence. He had been wrong. Sometimes, salvation doesn't arrive as a blessing. Sometimes it arrives in the dark, trembling, carrying a torn sack of cornmeal and the courage to say, "My children are hungry." And sometimes, all it takes to change 4 lives is lowering a rifle and opening a door. The first frost of autumn came quietly. It crept over the prairie at dawn, silvering the grass and turning the world brittle and bright. Caleb stood on the porch with his mended shoulder wrapped tight beneath his shirt, watching his breath fog the air. Behind him, he heard the scrape of boots. Tawa stepped out carrying a bucket nearly too large for him, jaw set with stubborn determination. "You'll spill half that before you reach the trough," Caleb said without turning. "I won't," the boy replied, already straining under the weight. Caleb allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. 3 months ago, the ranch had been a place of silence. Now it woke each morning with movement, water sloshing, wood chopping, Nita's soft humming drifting from the kitchen where a pony kneaded dough. Life had settled into rhythm. But peace on the frontier was never permanent. Caleb knew that. He just hadn't expected trouble to return so soon. It began with the cattle buyer. A tall man named Briggs rode in from town one afternoon, hat tipped low, eyes calculating. He circled the herd like a vulture measuring a carcass. "Heard you near lost everything in the drought," Briggs said casually. "Most folks did. We didn't," Caleb replied. Briggs' gaze shifted toward the house. Toward the children chasing each other near the fence. "You running a charity now?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "You here to buy cattle or spread rumors?" Briggs smirked. "Just saying. Town's talking. Town's always talking." Briggs leaned closer in the saddle. "Some folks think you're risking your land. Feeding extra mouths. Winter's coming." Caleb met his stare evenly. "Then I'll work harder." The buyer chuckled softly. "Hope that's enough." He rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving unease in his wake. That evening, Caleb didn't mention the visit. But a pony noticed the tension in his shoulders. "Something weighs on you," she said as they sat by the fire. He hesitated. "Winter's going to be tight," he admitted. "Hay's decent. Supplies are fair. But if prices drop, you think we are a burden," she finished quietly. His head snapped toward her. "No." She held his gaze, steady and searching. "You fear losing what you built." "Yes," he said honestly. "I do." Silence stretched between them, not cold, but careful. Then she reached into the pocket of her worn dress and placed something on the table. It was a small pouch of beads and hand-stitched leatherwork, intricate, beautiful. "I have skills too," she said. "There are traders who value craft. We can sell. We can trade. We are not helpless." He looked at the pouch, then at her. "You shouldn't have to prove your worth." Her expression softened. "Neither should you." The fire crackled between them. For the first time, Caleb realized something important. He was not carrying this alone. Winter arrived early. Snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the plains in white silence. The cattle huddled close. The wind howled like something alive. Inside, the ranch house glowed with warmth. A pony's beadwork began traveling with passing traders. Word spread quietly of her fine craftsmanship. In return came flour, dried fruit, lamp oil. Tawa grew stronger by the day, learning to mend fences even in biting wind. Caleb showed him how to read the sky for signs of incoming storms. Nita insisted on helping with everything, even if it meant dropping more flour than she measured. Laughter came easier now, but not all hearts in town softened. One bitter afternoon, as Caleb and Tawa hauled feed, smoke rose in the distance. Too close. Caleb's stomach dropped. "That's the north fence," he muttered. They rode hard through the snow. When they reached the boundary, Caleb's worst fear tightened his chest. The outer fence had been set ablaze. Flames licked through dry timber, spreading fast despite the cold. "Back!" Caleb shouted, pushing Tawa away as he leapt down to beat at the fire with his coat. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't accident. Someone had done this. By the time they contained it, the damage was done, a full stretch of fencing reduced to char and ash. Tawa's hands shook, not from cold. Why would someone do that? The boy asked. Caleb stared at the blackened ground. Fear makes men foolish, he said grimly. And cruel. That night, anger filled the ranch house heavier than smoke. A pony's eyes flashed when she heard what happened. They want to drive us away, she said. They want to scare us, Caleb corrected. Tawa slammed his small fist against the table. Let them try. Caleb crouched beside him. Strength isn't shouting, he said gently. It's standing steady. But what if they come back? Nita whispered from her chair. Caleb looked at each of them. They won't face just one man anymore. He meant it. The next morning, Caleb rode into town. Whispers followed him down the boardwalk. He ignored them. He found Sheriff Dawson outside the general store. Fence burned, Caleb said plainly. Dawson's expression hardened. You certain? Certain. The sheriff sighed heavily. There's unrest. Folks struggling. They look for someone to blame. And we're convenient, Caleb replied. Dawson met his eyes. You want protection. Caleb thought of a pony's steady hands. Tawa's stubborn pride. Nita's small arms around his waist. No, he said finally. I want fairness. The sheriff nodded slowly. I'll keep watch. It wasn't a promise of justice. But it was something. The true test came not from enemies, but from illness. In late January, Tawa developed a fever. It came fast and burned hot. A pony barely left his side. Caleb rode through snow to fetch the doctor from town, heart pounding harder than it had during any storm. The doctor examined the boy grimly. Bad infection, he muttered. If it spreads. He didn't finish. For 3 days and nights, they took turns sitting beside Tawa's bed. Caleb cooled the boy's forehead with damp cloths. A pony whispered soft prayers and old songs under her breath. Nita curled against Caleb one night, eyes wide with fear. Is he going away too? She asked quietly. The question pierced him. No, he said firmly. Not if love can hold him here. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. Tawa's breathing steadied. A pony wept silently, relief shaking her shoulders. Caleb stepped outside and let the cold air hit his face. He hadn't realized how deeply the boy had rooted himself into his heart. Loss had once defined Caleb's life. Now the thought of it felt unbearable. Spring thaw came like forgiveness. Snow melted into running streams. Grass returned greener than before. The rebuilt fence stood strong. One afternoon, Briggs, the cattle buyer, returned. He dismounted slowly, surveying the ranch. Heard about the fire, he said. Caleb said nothing. Briggs studied the healthy herd, the sturdy fence, the children playing near the porch. You didn't fold, he observed. No. Briggs shifted awkwardly. Town's warming up. Hard to argue with success. Caleb met his gaze. Harder to argue with decency. For a long moment, the buyer looked almost ashamed. I'll give you fair price this season, Briggs said finally. Caleb nodded once. That's all I ask. That evening, the ranch house filled with celebration. Not grand, not loud, but meaningful. They had survived drought, storm, fire, fever, and doubt. As the sun dipped low, Caleb stepped onto the porch beside a pony. You ever think about what would have happened, he asked quietly, if I hadn't walked around that barn that night? She considered. We would have found another way, she said gently. He shook his head. Maybe. She turned to him. But this was the way meant for us. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth and growing things. I used to think strength meant standing alone, Caleb said. And now? She asked. He looked toward the yard where Tawa was teaching Nita how to whistle. Now I know it means standing together. A pony slipped her hand into his, no hesitation this time. The gesture was simple, certain. Across the prairie, life stretched wide and uncertain as ever. But the ranch was no longer empty. It was home. And sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't found in grand victories or loud triumphs. Sometimes it's found in quiet courage. In choosing compassion over fear. In rebuilding what others try to burn down. In opening a door. In refusing to close it again.